My guest this evening is a creative force in the arts world. With an extensive background in opera, theater, musical theater, and journalism, she has entertained thousands of patrons around the globe. Her role as Christine Daae in The Phantom of the Opera was recognized as one of the best interpretations of the character. Please welcome to the Eclectic Arts virtual studio, Emma Grimsley. Emma.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Hanging in there.
It's the best that you can do, I think, for any of us. It's like it's almost like you have to put an asterisk about like how you're doing.
yeah. I've noticed whenever I talk to friends, there's that like 20 minutes at the beginning of the conversation that's just, what is going on? Like we just have to do that every time. There's no avoiding it. It's just too crazy.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like we were talking pre-show, it's we're kind of in this for the long haul, it looks like, unfortunately, and we just kind of do what we do. And that actually kind of brings me to what I want to talk about first with you, since we only have about 27 minutes. I want to talk about your 40-minute musical. We're going to get to that in a little bit, so kind of put that over into the corner. But you were telling me like when you were on the tour with Phantom of the Opera that it had finished, and then like that timeline was going right into the pandemic. So you kind of let the folks out there know what that whole thing looked like.
Yeah, we were, on the road. The national tour of the Phantom of the Opera was on the road starting in 2013, this new production that we were doing. And we took it all the way through February 2nd of 2020. That was our closing date. So we'd been counting down to that time, all of us starting to wonder, what shows are we going to be in next? Like, will we all see each other back in New York? Like, what's it going to be like to be off of the road? And we, I got an apartment in New York. I got all my stuff moved in. It took about a month to get everything settled. And then I think I moved in March 7th of 2020. And then March 12th was the day that Broadway went dark. So I had about 5 days in the city before we went on basically on lockdown from then on out. And my boyfriend and I spent about 100 days in our 1-bedroom apartment, sort of without the possibility of leaving, just because the streets are crowded and parks are crowded. And it was just, we'd go to the grocery store and then we'd come home just to limit our exposure to other people in case we were infected, in case they were infected, the whole thing. But anyway, then came down to New Orleans where my parents live. My parents, they're in the at-risk bracket. They're in their mid-60s. And they didn't want to stop for the night anywhere on a road trip because it was just a little scary. So they rented an RV and they drove it all the way to Manhattan and picked us up and drove back down. And so we had a little road trip, and now we're settled down here in the swamp in New Orleans in the South.
Wow. You do what you have to do.
Yeah.
I understand that because like both of my folks are still with us and they're in their 70s. So when I see them, I just saw them the other day because of some car issues, but you see them from a distance.
Right. Yeah. That was the only way we could think of doing it. We quarantined for 2 weeks. We got tested. Like we made sure that we were healthy enough to sort of join them in the RV. And so we just kind of merged our 2 quarantined households and took it back down south. It was
well, and like you were saying too, pre-show, that things down there are kind of like everywhere else in the U.S. that the cases are just going through the roof.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it opened up fairly early down here, so the wave of cases has just been rolling and rolling. And I think New Orleans might be doing better than the state of Louisiana on the whole, but I know it's still not great.
Yeah, it's that unfortunate news.
And this is that thing, that 20 minutes at the beginning of every conversation where it's just like, are you okay? How's it going for you? Like, you just can't help but talk about it.
Yeah, I was just, I got a text from somebody that I haven't talked to in a while. And the whole thing was about like, yeah, how have you been the last few months? What's going on with your job? What's going on with your family? All that kind of thing. And people just want to know, are you safe? Are you healthy? And if that's there, then that's the foundation at least. So then they can be thankful for that.
Right.
And so let's kind of, for a lot of people, they know you from Phantom of the Opera, obviously. And I met you and I met your really good friend, Eva, on the press junket that was almost exactly 2 years ago. It was early
It was
August.
beginning of August, wasn't it? I
Yeah,
think.
that's crazy
I
to think
know.
about.
I feel like it's been that long,
Yeah, it
but
feels like it was like 10 years ago or something. Um, but what I want to ask you is that can you kind of give people out there the timeline of when you joined the tour, and then because you came on and you're doing different roles on it, and then you're the alternate for Christine, and then you became the principal for Christine. So you've got a really interesting point of view, and I remember kind of chatting with you about that in the 1 minute they gave me or something during that press junket. But can you kind of speak to that whole timeline of your experience, being on from the beginning to the end of Phantom?
totally, yeah. I actually started auditioning for Phantom 2 years before I ever booked it. I was in Seattle doing a gig with a small opera company there called Vespertine Opera. It was actually, they were working with a company called Pacific Music Works at the time. I was
Oh,
doing Magic Flute with them back in like 2015, I think. And I got my first audition and I flew to New York. I took some days off from rehearsal, flew to New York, ended up moving to New York and subsequently like auditioning for Phantom 6 different times over 2 years. And every time it was no, until that last time when it was yes. And that was in August, almost 3 years ago, of 2017. And so I joined the tour. It was already in progress. They'd been doing shows for years at that point, and I was coming in replacing a woman who is another dear friend of mine. The sort of Christine crew rolls really tight. My friend Kate Davis, she was leaving the tour, and I came in to replace her as a Christine alternate. So the tour did 8 shows a week, and Christine luckily only has to do 6 of those 8 shows. So there are 2 shows every week where another performer will step in and do Christine so that she can rest, because that role is just, it's like, it's relentless. You're on stage the entire show, you're running around in 40-pound dresses and singing your face off. And so she gets to rest. So those 2 shows, I was the alternate Christine. I would go on whenever Eva, my friend who's done these interviews before and who we met the same day in Seattle doing that press junket. She was the principal Christine. So whenever she took shows off, I would play Christine. And whenever she was in the show, I was in the ensemble. I was in the female chorus. And I did that from August of 2017 through July of 2019. So about 2 years. And then Eva left the show around this time last year. And I moved up into her track. We call them tracks. Like you're sort of your role in the show, but it also includes all your backstage traffic and, like if you were to pick someone up and plug them into it, that you'd be plugging them into a track. So I would go into her track for the next, I think it was about 8 months until February. And it was wild. It was crazy going from being an alternate. It was 2 completely different types of excitement, but also of pressure. It was like, it's very different wondering, okay, when am I going to go on this week? And then going out there and being like, oh, I get to do it. And when you're the principal Christine, it's still exciting to get to do it, but you have to be ready to do it again the very next day and the day after that and the day after that. So it was one of the most remarkable times in my life, getting to do that, getting to do things like press more often, getting to, share the show with more people from that perspective. That was really, really cool. And so that was my journey. So I spent time as her understudy, alternate. There are sort of different ways to put it. And then took over as principal Christine and closed out the tour. And we had a big party in Toronto. That was our last city. And then that was it. And we were all looking forward to hanging out in New York. And sadly, did not come to pass.
Yeah, no, it's. I was going to ask you, what was it like for the very first time as an alternate when you got to play Christine? That very first performance, what was that like?
It was an unbelievable day. I was nervous. So luckily you get a good amount of rehearsal time if they're putting you into like one of those big roles. So I had a month of rehearsals. I was just I wasn't in the show yet, but I would spend my days at the theater where the show was performing with the stage manager and director, sort of going through my blocking, learning the show, learning everything, talking about the sort of craft part of it, of like, who is this person? How do you play her? Figuring out the acting portion of it, working on the music with the musical director, and then also the very real logistics of like, how do I get down this vanishing staircase that I have to walk on, and how to avoid the pyrotechnics, and how to stay safe on the set, things like that. So I spent about a month doing that. We had a week off, and then I joined the ensemble. And about a week into that process, I had my first performance. And just because of a schedule shift, Eva took both of her shows off that week on the same day. So we had a 2-show day. It was a Saturday, and we were in Boston. And I knew I was going on for the matinee. And then I found out sort of late in the game that I was going on for the evening show too. So the first time I ever did it, I had to do it twice in a row, just like bang, bang. And it went sort of like shockingly well, I think. I don't remember a ton about it. I remember though that I wasn't so nervous that I couldn't enjoy it. I remember really enjoying it because I've been performing my whole life. My parents are performers. I grew up in shows with them, and have been doing shows ever since, really. And to do something on that scale, sort of, with that budget, with like this, just like the stage magic of that production is kind of unthinkable. And to be part of a really welcoming cast, it was a really, really special show. The one slip up I remember was, we don't get to rehearse a lot with the actual principals that are in the show. So if you're rehearsing, they'll like pull an understudy out of the show to sort of give you a stage partner. So my first show was my first show performing with Jordan Craig, who played Raoul, one of Christine's love interests. And there's this big passionate kiss at the end of Act 1. And I'd never done it with him. And so I really went for it because that's what I'd been told to do. And I think he's used to doing it with other people. He had we just sort of brought two very different levels of energy to it. And we bonked teeth really, really hard. And I was mortified. And also I cut my lip. It was just a very strange thing to have to deal with in the middle of the most high pressure moment of my life. But I remember it fondly because it was just so silly. I was like, "Are you okay?" It's I think so, as soon as we got off stage. But yeah, that was the worst. I think that was the worst thing that happened, was that was the most embarrassing moment of my first show.
Well, and now you get to tell that story, and you can laugh about it now. So
right, yeah, distance from it definitely helps.
Well, and since we're on that kind of subject, during your tenure, either as the alternate or as the principal of Christine, did you have any other kind of things that, off the top of your head, that you had a mishap or something else that makes you laugh now, or something which is kind of crazy that happened on any given? Because you were there for a long period of time.
Yeah, there's a big on-stage costume change that happens for Christine right at the beginning of the show, and it's in the middle of the hardest song that you have to sing. So you sing a couple phrases of this song, and then you run up stage, and there's parts of your costume that tear away, and this big, huge skirt comes around you and fastens in 5 different places so that it doesn't come off. But it has to happen in about 15 seconds. It's a really fast change. And it was during my tenure as Principal Christine that the skirt came off. It came all the way off in front of everyone. I mean, luckily the costume I was wearing underneath was still there, so I wasn't totally exposed. But it didn't look like it was supposed to look, and I know the audience could tell because suddenly this giant skirt had just fallen to the ground. I had to step over it to keep singing the song. And there's a piece of the costume that tears away that leaves a bunch of Velcro patches exposed. And I tore that piece off to do the change, and then the skirt fell off. So the audience could see the Velcro patches. And there's this moment in that song where 2 ballerinas walk up to Christine. And I was so adrenaline drunk, I guess, from the nerves of losing the skirt in the middle of the song, that I didn't notice that one of the ballerinas we're all in matching costumes, so she had a similar piece. She put it over my Velcro patches so that nobody could see it. And then I didn't know I didn't know where it came from. Later in the show, I looked down, I was like, where did this part of I know I took this off. How did this reappear on my body? It was just like one of the silliest and most confusing things that could have happened. But I think skirts falling down, that happened a couple times. We've had to, hold the show right in the middle for illness or for like set mishaps, and those were always kind of crazy and exciting. But I think that's up there. Luckily, I don't know how I managed it, got away without any major lyrical flubs. I didn't forget words or change words or do anything silly like that. I have no idea how I made it out alive that way.
Wow, that's really no, thank you for sharing that about the skirt and not knowing how the rest of the other piece came on from your co-stars and that kind of thing. Trying to
It was very sweet of her. She knew, like, I'm so glad she took care of me. I just had no idea how it happened.
Yeah, and I think that's something that for people that go to theater or musical theater on a regular basis, it's live, but they don't really look at it that way. It's almost like they're watching a movie. I've kind of noticed in terms of reviewing these and being around other critics and other just fans that they're expecting to be kind of pristine. And so if something small happens, a lot of times they're kind of like, what happened there? Like, is that supposed to happen? Instead of just kind of rolling with it. So that's good that you didn't have too many things that people didn't pick up on. So I want to kind of come back to what we started off with, because as I was looking through some of the things that you've done earlier in your career during fandom, but also most recently was this 40 Minutes musical that I didn't even know that you were doing. And so can you speak to that, what that is, so people out there can check it out on YouTube and all that?
Yeah, totally. So that was actually my friend who I mentioned, Kate Davis, that I replaced when I joined the tour. She ended up coming back to the tour while I was on it. We got to tour together for a little while. And we were having a Zoom. This was like March 27th, like right after everything with coronavirus started. We were having a Phantom cast Zoom for Kate's birthday. And we said it was really sort of emotional because we'd all spent every day together for the last however many years we'd all been on the tour. And so seeing each other was nice, but also knowing that we didn't know when we'd actually get to see each other again, it was tough. And Kate is a brilliant songwriter, just like a really, first of all, like incredibly talented vocalist. She can sing anything. She can sing Christine, which is sort of in the more operatic realm of stuff. She can sing super belty musical theater. She can sing pop. She can sing folk. She's just like the most versatile person I've ever met. But she writes her own music. And I'm a writer. I studied that in college, and it's something I luckily got to really commit a lot of time to while I was on tour. And she called me the next day and was like, do you think there's any sort of, like, could we write something about this? Could we write something that is about this, not in so overwhelming a way that it couldn't, still be interesting outside of the context of the virus, but definitely informed by the moment? Could we team up and write something about basically how this moment in our history has placed all these limitations on the ways that we connect with each other, on our relationships with time and with space and with each other? And, what would that look like? What could we do? So I gave it a think, and I think I came up with this idea to do like a tapestry piece, like a sort of like a song quilt, like what we would call it a song cycle in opera or in musical theater, where it's a bunch of different songs belonging to different speakers or characters, but they're sort of linked by a common idea. So we wrote this 8-song cycle called 40 Minutes, which is, the length of a Zoom call. If you don't have a pro, that's the length of the call. They'll cut you off after 40 minutes. Exploring like the lives of, a big group of people trying to Zoom with each other. There's a song about a nurse calling home to say goodnight to her family when she's stuck on a really long shift. There's a song about a teacher trying to figure out how to teach like through distance learning all of a sudden. There's a song about someone living all alone and sort of not knowing like how radically that can change the life of someone who does live by themselves. And so we assembled our friends, basically our super talented friends, and sent them tracks of the music that Kate had written, and I sent them the lyrics, and we sort of topped them the music over the internet, and they made these beautiful videos, and we edited them all together and launched it as a whole piece on YouTube under 40 Minutes Musical, if you want to check it out, as a YouTube playlist, so you can just listen down all the way through all of them. And on Instagram as well, it has an Instagram, I think it's 40 Minutes Musical on Instagram as well, that they play in order as like IGTV videos. And we, as soon as we finished it, we wondered if there was a life for it in a bigger version. So now currently we're working on the sort of next generation version of this idea that's more grounded in an actual story. So there are main characters and there is like an arc for these people, but a lot of these songs live in it as well. It actually follows like an aspiring cartoonist, and she draws the things that are scary or confusing to her about the pandemic, and they sort of come to life and sing the songs that we've written. So it's been nice to have a project to work on. It was really cool to have something, because all of the cast members, I believe, were Phantom Tour cast members. So we got to sort of get the band back together, for lack of a better way of putting it, and let everybody do their thing. And, you know, there's been a lot of content put out that during all of this by performers, because we don't really know what to do with ourselves. You know, all of a sudden there's no outlet. And, you know, I mean, look at Alice, they have figured it out. Like they know how to like keep the whole thing going. But we, you know, we're looking at people who are typically in shows that have already been written. Like, what do we do? And so since the two of us could put our skill set together and come up with something original rather than like just sort of reimagining material that already existed, like that was our main purpose, was if we're going to put something on the internet, let's at least put something that nobody's ever seen. So that's the very long answer for what 40 Minutes Musical, but that's our little song cycle, our pet project.
Yeah, no, when I saw that, and I haven't watched or listened to all of the songs yet, but when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is so cool that you guys came up with this idea, like you're saying, you know, with the music and you're doing the lyrics, and yeah, it's all original things. And now that you're talking about, you're kind of working on like a second cycle of it, it almost sounds like something that could, you know, end up on stage at some point down the road.
Yeah, that's the hope. You know, we've written it very intentionally to have a certain amount of performance flexibility, just because we don't know what the industry is going to look like. So the way the idea exists now, it could be produced virtually. Like it could be a digital musical. It could also be like a safely distanced stage musical if we're still worried about distance whenever theater starts to come back. And it could end up being, you know, a musical in its own right. So we wanted to make sure that it was something that could have a lot of different iterations or versions of, you know, how it could be brought to life.
Yeah, no, that's smart that you didn't have tunnel vision. You had things looking out this way, so there's different layers of different possibilities. Because yeah, like you just said, we don't know what things are going to look like when the things start to kind of come back. So maybe one of these ideas will fit whatever the new normal will be. And
Yeah.
instead of saying putting all your eggs in one basket, we're going to do this way and then hope that it works. And then if it doesn't, then you're like, well, crap. Now what do we do? So that's awesome. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. You have a connection to the Northwest. I remember you told me in person, but can you tell me again? Because I forgot what it was and why you were here or your family was here.
Sure, yeah. Well, my parents, like I said, are performers. They're opera singers. And Seattle Opera, which is just like one of the coolest opera companies in the country, was a real home to us, like a sort of a home company, in that my parents work there often. And usually they do a big sort of, you know, like a Wagner opera, which is like really heavy German music with a huge orchestra. You know, picture like the helmet with the horns kind of
Mm.
stuff. And that is sort of what my parents specialize in. And they would do one of those every summer. And so I spent a lot of summers in Seattle. It feels very much like a second home. It was, all my like happy summer memories, if people have them at a summer camp or like at their grandparents' house, like all my happy summer memories are like in Lower Queen Anne. Like that's like just like roaming around with like hanging out with friends and going to the giant fountain under the Space Needle and all that stuff.
Okay, so that makes sense. And yeah, I know they're doing like the ring cycle and some other kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, that was often my dad. Like there was one summer where my dad's face was just like a giant poster on the side of the opera house. We did the ring. I think every summer that they did it, my parents were in that show. So, and I was in it a couple times as like a non-speaking part. But that company and those shows are like very dear to our hearts.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been so fortunate that they allowed me to start reviewing the performances because I don't have an opera background whatsoever. So it's like a whole new world to me to come and experience that. And just talking about it makes me miss it so much because
No, miss it too.
I was just starting to get into it. I know that opening nights for the opera were always on Saturdays and the opening night for the ballet was always on Fridays and all this kind of stuff. And now it's like we were talking pre-show, what day is it? I don't even
I
know.
know. I know.
Thank goodness for calendars.
Right. We got to keep our date books. Got it. Even though we've got nowhere to go.
Yeah. Emma, I will talk to you offline. We'll try to figure out another time to have you come on. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope that you and your family and everyone stay safe down in Louisiana. And we'll talk again sooner than later.
Sounds great. So good to see you again, Mark.
Good seeing you. Okay. Take care and have a good night.
See you later.
Bye-bye.